The invitation was never meant to be taken seriously. At least that's what everyone believed. When the rich lady casually mentioned her poor driver's name during a glittering dinner conversation, laughter followed. Sounded like a joke, a cruel one. Why would a man who spent his days behind the steering wheel, wearing worn gloves and quiet dignity, ever step into a world of crystal chandeliers, designer dresses, and powerful elites? The idea alone seemed ridiculous to them. But what no one realized was that this single invitation was about to shake their assumptions to the core. Her name was Evelyn Carter, a woman known for her wealth, influence, and sharp tongue. She lived in a mansion where silence felt expensive and every detail screamed power. For years her driver Daniel had watched her world from the front seat, listening, observing, saying little. He was polite, reserved, and always on time. To Evelyn and her social circle, he was invisible, just a poor driver who knew his place. Or so they thought. When she announced she would be hosting an exclusive evening party and joked about inviting Daniel, the room erupted in amused smiles. Someone dared her to actually do it. And with a smirk she did. The invitation reached Daniel late that evening, placed carefully on the dashboard after his shift. He stared at it in disbelief. The paper felt too smooth for his hands, the words too elegant for his world. For a moment, he wondered if it was another test, another way to remind him of the distance between them. But something in him stirred. Quiet resolve. He didn't ask questions. He simply nodded to himself and went home, carrying the invitation like a secret he wasn't ready to explain. On the night of the party, Evelyn's mansion glowed with golden lights. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Guests stepped out dressed in confidence and silk, and laughter floated through the air like music. Inside, conversations buzzed about business deals, reputations, and power. Somewhere between the clinking glasses and whispered gossip, someone remembered the joke. "Did your driver really think he could show up?" a guest asked, smirking. Evelyn laughed, lifting her glass, certain the evening would go exactly as planned. Then the front gates opened. The chatter slowly faded as a single figure stepped forward. Heads turned. Miles froze. The man walking in did not look like the poor driver they remembered. His posture was calm, his presence undeniable, and the look in his eyes held a confidence no one expected. Evelyn's smile slipped, her heart skipping a beat as she realized something was terribly wrong, or incredibly right. Because in that moment, it became clear that Daniel had not come to be mocked. He had come with a truth that would leave everyone in that room completely stunned. For a few long seconds no one spoke. The soft music continued to play, but it felt distant, like it belonged to another room, another moment. Daniel stood just inside the entrance, dressed neatly, nothing flashy, yet nothing out of place. His suit was simple, well-fitted, and worn with quiet confidence. He didn't rush or hesitate. He looked around slowly, taking in the faces that now stared at him with disbelief. These were the same people who had laughed at the idea of his presence, the same ones who never noticed him when he opened their car doors. Evelyn tightened her grip on her glass. Her mind raced. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Daniel was supposed to feel uncomfortable, small, out of place. Instead, he looked calm, almost familiar with the setting, as if he had stepped into rooms like this before. A few guests whispered to each other, their curious eyes scanning him from head to toe, trying to find something that would explain the unease creeping into their chests. As Daniel walked forward, memories surfaced from Evelyn's past. Small moments she had dismissed without thought. The way he spoke when spoken to, careful yet intelligent. The way he listened not just to directions but to conversations. She remembered times when he had corrected a route during traffic without using GPS, or mentioned places she didn't recall him ever visiting. Back then, she had brushed it off as coincidence. Now, standing face to face with him under the glowing lights, those memories felt heavier. Daniel stopped a few steps away from her and offered a polite nod. "Thank you for inviting me," he said simply. His voice was steady, respectful, and carried just enough confidence to make the room lean in. Evelyn forced a smile, unsure how to respond. This wasn't the driver she believed she knew. Or maybe it was, and she had never really looked closely enough. Across the room, a few guests exchanged uneasy glances. One man frowned, clearly trying to place Daniel's face. Another woman lowered her voice, whispering that she felt like she had seen him somewhere important before. The tension thickened, filling the space between polite smiles and unspoken questions. Who was he really? And why did his presence feel like a challenge to everything they assumed about status and class? Daniel's eyes briefly drifted around the room, not with envy, but with recognition. There was no trace of bitterness in his expression, only a quiet awareness. He had spent years listening from the driver's seat, learning how power spoke, how wealth moved, how respect was given and taken. Tonight he wasn't there to impress. He was there because he had been invited, even if the invitation was meant as a joke. Evelyn cleared her throat and gestured toward the room, encouraging the evening to continue. Laughter slowly returned, though it sounded forced now. Conversations resumed, but Daniel remained the center of attention, whether anyone admitted it or not. Every step he took, every word he spoke, added to the mystery surrounding him. As he accepted a drink and thanked the server, Evelyn watched closely, her confidence beginning to crack. She realized she had never asked Daniel about his life, his past, or his dreams. She had only seen the uniform, not the man. And as the night deepened, one question echoed silently through her mind and the minds of everyone watching him. What secret was Daniel carrying into this room, and how long before it changed everything they thought they knew? Daniel moved through the room slowly, aware of the eyes following him but refusing to let them change his pace. Every step felt deliberate, not rehearsed, just steady. A few guests greeted him out of courtesy, their smiles polite but tight. Others avoided him altogether, suddenly very interested in their drinks. He noticed it all, the subtle shifts in body language, the way conversations lowered when he passed by. This world was built on unspoken rules, and his presence had quietly broken one of them. Near the balcony, a senior businessman named Harold studied Daniel with open suspicion. Harold had spent decades climbing social ladders and didn't like surprises. "Drivers don't just walk in like that," he muttered to the woman beside him. "Not unless there's something we don't know." His words carried no kindness, only discomfort. To him, status was everything, and Daniel's calm confidence felt like a threat to an order he trusted too much. Evelyn tried to reclaim control of the evening, moving from group to group, laughing a little louder than usual. But her attention kept drifting back to Daniel. She watched the way people reacted to him, how some seemed drawn to him without understanding why. A strange unease settled in her chest. She had invited him to mock him, to remind everyone, and maybe herself, of where power sat. Instead, she felt like the one being tested. At the edge of the room, Daniel paused near a large painting, studying it with interest. A young woman named Clara, a guest who had always felt out of place among the wealthy crowd, noticed him. She approached cautiously, curiosity stronger than judgment. "Do you like art?" she asked. Daniel smiled gently and replied that he appreciated stories more than price tags. The simplicity of his answer caught her off guard. Their quiet conversation felt real in a room full of performance. From Clara's point of view, Daniel didn't seem poor or rich. He seemed grounded. That alone made him different. She wondered how many people in this room had ever been truly seen for who they were, rather than what they owned. Watching Evelyn from across the room, Clara sensed a silent battle forming, one built not on words, but on pride and hidden truths. Meanwhile, Evelyn's assistant whispered urgently in her ear, sharing that a few guests were asking questions about Daniel's background. Evelyn waved it off, but her thoughts betrayed her calm expression. She realized she knew almost nothing about the man who had driven her for years. No family stories, no complaints, no demands, just quiet reliability. That silence now felt intentional. Daniel glanced at Evelyn once more, their eyes meeting briefly. There was no challenge in his gaze, no revenge. Just patience. It unsettled her more than anger ever could. The party continued around them, but an invisible line had been drawn. People sensed it, felt it tightening with every passing minute. Somewhere deep inside, Evelyn feared that the joke she started was no longer hers to control. And as whispers grew and assumptions began to crack, one truth became impossible to ignore. Daniel's presence wasn't accidental, and whatever he carried from his past was slowly closing in on the carefully protected world around them. The air in the room felt heavier as the night went on, like something unseen was pressing down on everyone's thoughts. Conversations became shorter, laughter more careful. Daniel had not done anything dramatic, yet his quiet presence continued to unsettle the balance. Evelyn sensed it too. The party she once controlled now seemed to move on its own, guided by curiosity and unease rather than celebration. A waiter passed by with a tray, and Daniel stepped aside without being asked. The simple gesture caught Evelyn's attention. Even now, he was considerate, observant. It reminded her of how he always opened the car door before she reached for it, how he waited silently when she took phone calls, how he never once complained about late nights or sudden schedule changes. That kind of discipline didn't come from nowhere. It was learned, earned. Across the room, Harold was no longer whispering. He openly questioned another guest, trying to confirm whether Daniel was connected to any powerful families or businesses. No one had answers. That uncertainty began to spread, making people uneasy. In a world where information was currency, not knowing who someone was felt dangerous. Eyes followed Daniel again, this time with caution instead of mockery. Evelyn finally approached him, her steps measured, her smile carefully controlled. "Are you enjoying yourself?" she asked, her voice light but her eyes searching. Daniel met her gaze, neither bowing nor challenging. "It's an interesting evening," he replied. The words were harmless, yet they carried weight. Evelyn felt as though he was saying much more without actually saying anything. A sudden pause in the music drew attention to the center of the room. A guest had requested a toast, raising a glass to success, power, and the people who made it all possible. As applause followed, Daniel remained still, his expression unreadable. Clara noticed his hands tighten slightly, as if he were holding back a memory or a decision. She sensed that something important was coming, though she couldn't explain why. Evelyn's phone buzzed in her hand. A message flashed on the screen, causing her breath to catch. She quickly locked it and slipped it into her purse, but the shift in her expression did not go unnoticed. For the first time that evening, fear crept into her eyes. Whatever the message contained, it was connected to Daniel. She knew it. The realization made her heart pound. The guests continued to mingle, unaware that the night was nearing a turning point. Daniel slowly made his way toward the large windows overlooking the city lights. He stood there quietly, as if gathering his thoughts. From behind him, whispers grew louder. People wanted answers. They wanted clarity. But Daniel offered none. As Evelyn watched him from across the room, she felt a deep sense of regret mixed with dread. The joke had gone too far. The invitation had opened a door she could not close. And as the clock ticked closer to midnight, it became clear to everyone that the truth Daniel carried was about to surface. And when it did, nothing in that room would remain the same. The city lights outside shimmered like distant stars, but inside the mansion, everything felt on edge. Daniel remained by the window, his reflection faintly visible in the glass. From that angle, he could see the entire room without turning around. He had spent years watching people from mirrors and rear-view reflections, learning more from silence than words. Tonight was no different, except now, the silence was louder than ever. Evelyn tried to steady herself, but the message on her phone echoed in her mind. It wasn't just a warning, it was a reminder. A name had appeared, one she hadn't heard spoken in years, tied to a past she had carefully buried beneath success and wealth. She looked at Daniel again, really looked at him, and a frightening thought took shape. What if he hadn't come because of her invitation? What if he had been waiting for this moment all along? Across the room, Harold received a call of his own. His face drained of color as he listened, turning slightly away from the guests. When he ended the call, his confident posture collapsed into tension. He glanced toward Daniel, then toward Evelyn, connecting pieces that didn't fit comfortably together. Whatever he had just learned confirmed his worst suspicion. This night was not an accident. Clara noticed the shift before anyone else. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker. She watched Evelyn move toward Daniel again, this time without the practiced smile. Guests began to sense something unfolding beneath the surface, their conversations dying out one by one. The energy changed from curiosity to anticipation, like the pause before a storm. Daniel finally turned from the window. His eyes met Evelyn's, and for a brief second, the years between them seemed to collapse. The driver and the employer, the rich lady and the poor man, those labels suddenly felt meaningless. He walked toward the center of the room, not to draw attention, but somehow all attention followed him anyway. A guest asked aloud, half joking, half nervous, "So, Daniel, what do you really do?" The question hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked around the room, at the faces filled with doubt, fear, and expectation. Some recognized him now, not from memory, but from instinct. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits. Evelyn's heart raced as she realized the truth she feared was no longer hers to hide. The joke, the mockery, the invitation, it had all led here. Whatever Daniel was about to reveal would not only change how they saw him, but how they saw themselves. Status, wealth, control, none of it felt secure anymore. As Daniel took a slow breath, preparing to speak, the mansion seemed to hold its own breath with him. Every whisper stopped. Every eye locked onto him. The moment teetered on the edge of revelation, and the question was no longer who Daniel was, but what his truth would cost everyone in that room when it finally came to light. Daniel finally spoke, and his voice cut through the silence like a steady blade. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. "I was invited here as a joke," he said calmly, eyes moving across the room. "And I understand why." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn felt heat rise to her face. People see a uniform and decide the whole story. I've lived with that for a long time. He paused, then continued. "I wasn't always a driver." The words landed hard. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel explained simply and without drama that years ago he had been a partner in a logistics company that managed transport routes and security contracts for major corporations. A sudden betrayal by people he trusted had cost him everything. His company, his reputation, his voice in rooms like this. Rather than fight publicly, he stepped away, choosing silence over endless battles. Driving became a way to observe, to rebuild quietly, to stay close to the world that once pushed him out. Harold's face went pale. He recognized the story now. The company Daniel mentioned had disappeared overnight, and a handful of powerful people in the room had benefited from that collapse. Evelyn felt her chest tighten as the pieces clicked into place. The message on her phone suddenly made sense. Daniel wasn't just her driver. He was a reminder of choices she and others had made when money spoke louder than fairness. "I didn't come tonight for revenge," Daniel said, his gaze settling on Evelyn. "I came because you invited me, and because it was time you saw me as a person, not a position." His words weren't cruel, but they carried truth, and truth can be heavier than anger. The room was silent, stunned by the calm power of his honesty. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice barely steady. "I didn't know," she said. It wasn't an excuse, just a confession. For the first time that night, she looked smaller, stripped of the confidence that wealth usually gave her. Around them, guests avoided eye contact, realizing their assumptions had been exposed just as clearly. Then Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim folder. "There's one more thing," he said. "I'm not here to reclaim my past." He revealed that he had recently invested, quietly, in a new venture, one built on transparency and fair partnerships. Several names in the room were connected to it already, unknowingly. The realization hit hard. The man they mocked was now shaping the future they planned to profit from. Relief and shock mixed in the air. The conflict had resolved, but not in the way anyone expected. Daniel wasn't taking power back by force. He was redefining it. As guests began to process what had happened, Daniel turned to leave, thanking Evelyn politely for the evening. But just as he reached the door, he stopped and added one final twist. "By the way," he said softly, "tomorrow is my last day as a driver." I was never meant to stay." The doors closed behind him, leaving the room frozen in stunned silence, and Evelyn standing there with one final question echoing in her mind. If Daniel had only been passing through her life, how many other truths had she ignored along the way? The mansion felt empty after Daniel left, even though it was still full of people. Conversations restarted slowly, but they lacked energy. What had once been a night of pride and display had turned into a quiet moment of self-reflection. Guests made polite excuses and began to leave, each carrying their own thoughts about status, respect, and the danger of judging someone by their position. The laughter that once filled the room never fully returned. Evelyn remained standing near the center, staring at the closed doors. For the first time in years, wealth did not comfort her. She replayed every interaction she had ever had with Daniel, the short greetings, the instructions, the moments she spoke without listening. The joke she thought was harmless now felt like a mirror, showing her who she had become. Power had made her careless, and carelessness had cost her dignity. Over the following days, news quietly spread through elite circles. Daniel's new venture gained attention, not because of drama, but because of trust. People who worked with him spoke of fairness, clear values, and respect. Those who once dismissed him as a poor driver now spoke his name carefully. Some reached out with apologies. Others stayed silent, afraid to face their own reflection. Daniel accepted neither praise nor resentment. He focused on building something better than what he had lost. Clara met Daniel once more weeks later by chance at a small cafe. He was the same, calm, thoughtful, grounded. She thanked him for reminding her that worth is not measured by wealth. Daniel smiled and told her that stories change when people choose to see each other clearly. Their conversation was brief, but it stayed with her long after they parted. As for Evelyn, she changed in quieter ways. She didn't announce it or seek attention. She started listening more, speaking less. She learned the names of people she once ignored. The mansion felt different. Not smaller but more honest. The experience had humbled her in a way no loss of money ever could. She understood now that respect is not owned, it is earned. Months later, Evelyn received a handwritten note. It was short and simple. Daniel thanked her for the invitation, not for the joke, but for the moment it created. It forced truth into the open, and sometimes, truth needs an unexpected door. Evelyn folded the note carefully, holding on to it as a reminder. The story of the rich lady and her poor driver became a quiet lesson passed between people rather than a headline. It wasn't about revenge or embarrassment. It was about assumptions, hidden strength, and the cost of underestimating others. In the end, Daniel didn't prove his worth to the room. He proved it to himself long before he ever walked in. And that was the moment that truly changed everything.